It must not be a capitalist system, because we don't want to exploit anybody. We don't want to be exploited, and we don't want to exploit anybody.
Ain't nobody going to do it for us. There's nobody outside of yourself, nobody outside of ourselves that's going to do this work for us. We have to put in that real work.
Because the better you are at exploiting people, the more successful you are within capitalism.
We want to say salute to all our political prisoners, our POWs, our elder comrades in exile.
The satisfaction we need as a people only comes through liberation and independence.
Because we're not just building for self, we're building for the family, because the family is broken. We're building for the community is broken. The nation is broken. The race is under attack. We're in a state of emergency.
You're tuned in to the New African Broadcast Association, where we inform, educate, and elevate. Free the land. Never.
We always say the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary.
These are the voices of New Africa. These are the voices of New Africa. These are the voices of New Africa. Free in the land, and we ain't asking y'all.
And welcome to the Voices of New Africa, the show where we educate the uneducated and re-educate the miseducated. Let me get this echo out of here. Try to get this echo out of here. All right. So yeah, I am your host, Brother Prophecy, and riding with me, as always, I got my comrade Kanye and our grandmaster teacher, Elder Baba Fadali. And people just calling us on the air all the time. We ain't finna answer call. We on the air.
Let me turn that ring.
Okay, we can do that. But yeah, we just wrapped up our radio portion of the broadcast, and we had all kinds of technical difficulties going on. What's up, Veronica and comrade brother Atiba? I see y'all out there looking. Appreciate y'all doing your thing. I already got it started, letting everybody know that the show is on and we're about to go down and do our thing. But yeah, we've been having a lively discussions. We've been talking about a whole lot of things. Before we get into the discussion, how y'all doing? How everybody doing this week?
I'm doing wonderful. I don't hear echo, so that's good. All right. Yeah, I'm doing wonderful. How about yourself, Grandmaster?
Pretty glad to deal with educating the uneducated and re-educating, and we are ready for that. We're ready for that.
Definitely. So just to backtrack and kind of get into some of the conversations that we were having earlier, something happened in Ethiopia, just recently. I think they've been suffering 2 nights straight of bombing from airstrikes. And you were talking about the history of Ethiopia and how they came about to be where they are now, and where leadership all the way from Haile Selassie. First of all, what happened in Ethiopia just this past few days?
Okay, let me tell you, for several, I think that's March. There's been a war, before March in Ethiopia, Tigray, which is one of the regions in Ethiopia, and Ethiopia considers itself to be an empire. And the Tigrayan people, you got the Oromo people, then you got the Asmaric, people. And the Asmaric are the ones that had been ruling, from the early days of Ethiopia, and Haile Selassie was the last Amharic leader that was considered to be an emperor. And in the 70s, they had a famine, and Haile Selassie was overthrown, I think, in 74. Because he didn't seem to have the sentiment for his people. He was feeding his lions, and our people were starving, and people all over the world, particularly from the United States, formed Afrika, which led to food being brought to Ethiopia, and many people that were even on welfare were sending money, monies to Ethiopia. And they had a revolution. And Ethiopia do have a revolution. You have contending forces. So it's been Ethiopia was at peace, and this present president seemed to be one that seemed to be respected in the African Union and all that. And then I think in the last year or so, the Tigrayans wanted to break away, just like Eritrea broke away from Ethiopia in the 70s also. And so the response from the federal government has been to do an all-out war against the people of Tigray, and they did have an attempt for peace settlement in March, but eventually it did, it broke down, and so the government decided it wanted to stop the people of Tigray out, and so 3/4 today, 3/4 of the people of Tigray are suffering from malnutrition, and so recently, this past week, several countries, Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. Uhuru Kenyatta, who was the former president of Kenya, and one of the former presidents, Basanjo from Nigeria, and they had a peace conference in South Africa, and so now the peace is suffering right now. 3/4 of the people are in starvation, but it shows you what we talked about: neo-colonialism in Africa, and then Nkrumah has a book called Class Struggle in Africa. So we have to begin to see that there are classes of people that are created under the neo-colonial regime, and they have no regard for the masses of people. They're basically looking at their own interests, and so consequently, we see these wars breaking up in down in Ethiopia. We had the South Sudan, and then we had Sudan. You go back and look at see what happened. We will see that our people have been divided up into classes of people and characterized as being, something different from each other. And for example, the Eritreans, many of them had, thought they were Arab, even though when you saw Eritrean in, America back in the 70s, they looked no different from the regular, Ethiopian, but they're identifying with the Islam religion as Arab. And in Sudan, we know that question is there too. All these Africans with Arabic, they're Africans, but they're divided up, and then we have the leadership when they do come into power, being influenced by forces outside, and they create wars among each other to divide up the spoil, so to speak, and so consequently, this guy, the president, and I'm remiss because I can't remember his name, the president, of the Federation, the federal government of Ethiopia. Yeah, of Ethiopia.
Well, is it a woman?
No, it's a male.
Okay.
But a woman broke and she was a part of the government, and she was on PBS this past Friday, Thursday, and she pointed out that how the federal troops and the troops from Eritrea and all have gone into Tigray and raped men, and so she resigned from the Ethiopian government because of the way the women and babies and children were being handled by the federal troops that were going in there and taking over. Because Tigray at one time had got the best of the government for a while, until the starvation campaign, and we must understand these starvation campaigns, because in many instances it is by these forces outside. Because you think about things in terms of but Ethiopia supplied planes and weapons by the United States, and the United States is prominent in all the things that are happening in terms of civil wars throughout Africa.
Yeah. Let me do this. That's a good point. You made a lot of good information, especially breaking down the history. I think it's important to note and understand what neo-colonialism is. Just because you see an area that's ruled by an African person or a black face, somebody rule it because one of our grandmaster teacher, General Hamish, would always say neo-colonialism is simply white rule and black face. And what you see throughout Africa, even with like the starvation, the hunger, the wars, and all of the violence that is promoted, because that's not all of Africa. Africa has great cities and a lot of great things going on for them, but a lot of the negative things that you see is the result of Western and U.S. power, colonial forces, imperial forces, who have a hidden hand in other governments, causing conflict, overthrowing governments, and using divide and conquer techniques amongst the people and amongst the governments that they don't want in power, in order so they can get someone in power that's more friendly to U.S. or Western interests. It's famously said that Africa is not rich, the people are. Africa is not poor, the people are. Africa is one of the richest continents on the planet, but the poverty that you see in Africa is not indigenous to the continent. This is something that was put on the continent by European and Western, American, U.S. power. So yeah, I appreciate your analysis and breaking down the history of something, and it's something we have to follow and something we have to understand, because a lot of people will point to failures in leaderships in African government or black-led government and say, "Oh, see, y'all can't govern yourself, you can't do this," but they deny the responsibility of the neo-colonists or the European hand that is controlling the scene, that are using these so-called leaders, but are nothing but really puppets for the European interests, European and U.S. interests. So, but yeah, what's going on in Ethiopia is something that. Sorry about that. It's something that we got to keep an eye out on. Another thing that happened in the news, big thing that happened in the news lately, and I won't necessarily say it's a big thing, but a lot of people have been talking about it. Kyrie Irving, a basketball player, made a post where he posted a documentary. The documentary, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is called From Hebrews to Negro. And dude, stop calling, bro. I mean, I'm using this to post up my phone and stuff. But yeah, the documentary was called From Hebrews to Jews, and he got a lot of backlash, called anti-Semitic, and basically at a press conference, he didn't really stand down. He said that he didn't necessarily support everything that was in the documentary. He just posted it. He said it's 2022. History should not be hidden from anyone. But they have suspended that brother. They have suspended his contract with Nike. Nike has said that they're not going to put out his new shoe, and basically attacking this brother from the finances part. But we've had a lot of interesting discussions about this point, because this whole argument against so-called Jews, and I say so-called Jews because Judaism is not a people, even though it might seem like there's a group of people or a race, and they might even present it that way in some cases. It's not people. It is a religion. It is a religion. There are Jewish people who are European. You have Asian Jewish people. You have African Jewish people. Some of the most ancient people of the faith are from of African origins. Even if you look up the word Semitic, it means a couple of different things. One of them means Afro-Asian. Another one means those who speak certain languages. Aramaic, Hebrew, and a few others. So yeah, in Arabic. And so what these brothers, even Kanye West, their basic argument is that the individuals, and to backtrack, like I said, Judaism is a religion. It is not a people. But the critique that we have had against the so-called Jews is not against the religion, but it's against a political movement called Zionism. And this is something that was started by European Jews in order to establish a Jewish homeland. And really, some of the techniques and tactics that they have used have allowed them to gain a disproportionate amount of power, resources, and influence over the whole planet, basically, especially in the areas of finance, banking, the media, entertainment industry. That's why you say, Jewish people control this and that. So this is the basis of much of that criticism. And this is what Kyrie and both Kanye are basically alluding to. And he's saying we're not going to back down because this is just history. And you're attacking us because we're exposing a certain history, even though I don't think Kanye West is the most articulate about it. And they kind of make it easy because they're not articulating it in a way that it should be, personally, is what I believe. But what do you have to say about this, Grandmaster Teacher?
Yeah. So we have to begin to, like I said, understand the history of this, because there's so many, us are shocked, because we feel like the Jews are, our friends, have been our friends, in America and all that, during the slavery, chattel slavery and the abolition movement and different things like that. And then they became people who financed our poets like Richard Wright and different, people. But in the reality is that there have always been underlying conflict over who's going to control our movement. Are we going to control our movement, or are we going to let other people control our movement? And in many instances, the Zionists have utilized our position of being people that were being lynched and all that to, and having given the enterprise of being over us and control of our movements and control of our leaders. And even when we talk about the ghetto, the ghetto was a term that was applied to the European, the people who had been taken out of Palestine and brought into Europe, and they practiced Judaism, and they were separated from the rest of the Europeans because of their religion, and they called the areas where they were concentrating ghettos. And so if you look at the parallel in terms of African people, we are African people who are taken away from Africa and are disparate. And so you can see that we feel like we have a common link, but in reality, we have been utilized by these forces to further enrich themselves and further control our institutions and our community. And so consequently, in the 60s, we began to throw off, for all time, those kind of influence, and began to try to run our own movements. And and we used to call it the white liberal. We used to say, we found you out. Many of the white liberals were people that they would call themselves Jews, and so consequently they were compromising our movements and and even when we came up with trying to get stuff from the federal government, like what I call that, but going to college,
student aid.
Right, student aid, different things, and we've been challenged, and sued by these same people who were supposed to be our friends, and so consequently, this is where we are today. The Zionist state of Israel, created in 1947. With the help of Ralph J. Bunche. Ralph J. Bunche was a black guy representing the United States, in the UN, and got the Arabs in the Palestine to agree give Israel a portion of Palestine, and they created the state of Israel. And a war took place, and Israel, the state of Israel, who had themselves used terrorist methods and all that during World War II, after World War II, against the British, because the British were in control of Palestine at that time, and the British had promised them that they could have a homeland, and the British wasn't moving fast enough, so the Stern gang, Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan, and other leaders of the Zionist movement, they attacked the British and even assassinated one of the British people that was in charge. And the United States stepped in, and Ralph Bunche became the representative, and they created the state of Israel. And the state of Israel had the war with the Arabs, in which they ran out. A lot of people, Palestinians, ran out from their villages. I think about 400 villages were vacated, and Israelis destroyed those villages, and then wouldn't allow the Palestinians to come in. That's why we had the war of the Palestinians against the state of Israel in 67 and 73, And so consequently, what we're talking about is not a race of people, culture. We're talking about a political movement called Zionism, that was created by Theodore Herzl in the 1800s, in the late 1800s, and created the World Zionist movement. And they wanted to go anywhere they can have a homeland. Even the British had offered to settle them in Uganda, when the British had control of Uganda. But by 1917, they came up with what they call a Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration gave the right of these Europeans that were scattered in Russia and all over, Europe, Germany, gave them the right to settle in Palestine. And when they didn't go up to the agreement, they became terrorists under the Stern gang. And so consequently, this is what I'm saying. So when we look at now the Anti-Defamation League, which is a Zionist organization that always attacks anybody that has criticism, of their movement of European Jews in America or anywhere, and they're using the Holocaust as an excuse for them being able to bully anybody, even when they're telling the truth about how they've been controlling not just the banks and all that, but even controlling the black movements or preventing the black movement from coming to fruition as a result of because they don't want us to be independent of our own, and operate on our own. And I pointed out earlier, it goes all the way back, to the abolition movement, which William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany had to break from him because he was trying to control the black, abolition movement. But ultimately, his grandson created the NAACP, Oswald Garrison, grandson of William Lloyd Garrison, created the NAACP, and him and other Zionists created the NAACP because they were afraid of lynching that had taken place in Atlanta in 1905. And so they said, well, the best way we can do that is we can go and have an anti-lynching movement, but we're not going to be in front. We have Africans, black folks in front, like Du Bois and Ida B. Wells, who were the only members of the board of the NAACP in the beginning. So it's not a black organization. It was an organization created by these same group of people that wanted to be have control over all our moves, like culture and everything else. So that's why we should stand up against all of these so-called charges of anti-Semitism. Sometimes it may be something that is prejudice, but we don't want to support what's prejudice, but we do want to let people know that the slave trade and all those things were, a result of these people being able to establish banks and insurance companies to insure the slave ships and all those things, And this has been documented in one book, about volume 1, volume 2 of the secret relationship between blacks and Jews that was published by the Nation of Islam, and there are many. It's loaded with facts and names and everything of people, characters that were involved in slavery, and and became enriched, like the Lords of London and all that, created by these people, because in Europe, usury was illegal, and they were only allowed the Jews, what the people they call the Jews in the ghettos, to establish banks to loan money to Queen Elizabeth and all those people who became instrumental in the so-called transatlantic slave trade.
Definitely. I want to pick up on something you said when you talk about the formation of the NAACP, and you stated that there were so-called Jewish people who actually started this organization. And although we look at it as a so-called black organization, it's not really a black organization. And it was started for the purpose because there was some Jewish people who were actually lynched. They were actually being
one Jewish person was lynched in 1905 in Atlanta.
Yeah,
right.
It was a Jewish person got lynched.
Right.
And in order to fight this front, what they did is they used us to stand on the front line to fight this, right, so they can pass laws that they were being affected about.
Correct.
And I think that's important to really understand, because that's a tactic that has been used over and over and over against our people. There are people who come and say, well, we want to support you and we got your back and we will even fund you. But the only thing that they're doing is they're funding our organization to get things done for them and to gain political power and policies that benefit them change. And at the end of the day, I should say, when the smoke has cleared, we end up having suffered, going to prison, being murdered, being assassinated, being brutalized. And the gains from our struggle, we benefit the least from. And that's been the story time and time again. It happened with the civil rights movement. Black people did not benefit the most from the gains of the civil rights movement. I mean, if you look at it, objectively look at it, probably white women benefited most. Even the most recent movement against the anti-police brutality from, the Mike Browns and such. Other people have benefited more than we have. LGBT have gotten more things passed than we have. We barely got what we get, like Juneteenth, and they barely did want to pass an anti-lynching bill. An anti-lynching bill. No George Floyd bill. None of these things. Even though for a time when the heat was really hot after the George Floyd movement and America was burning, you had the NFL saying, "We stand with you, black people." As you turn on your TV, every corporation in America was saying, "We with you, black people." But like I said, when the smoke clears, we didn't get anything from it. They say, hey, you can celebrate a holiday that you already been celebrating anyway. But now we give you permission to celebrate it. Aren't you happy, Negroes? So these are really trick gifts, and we have to understand how politics work, because that's why, we push back from the system. We ain't trying to indulge. We say, like you said, all remedies have been exhausted. We've been there, we've done that. And so yeah, I mean, these tactics have been used on us, and it's nothing new because you said the NAACP, one of the black organizations created by Jews, so-called Jews, for the purpose of getting laws passed that benefit them. And that's how it is operated. So it's important that we understand. That's why we're talking about trying to gain independence, trying to gain control over the institutions and the resources and the systems that govern our lives, because then we can create the type of systems and the type of institutions that actually benefit us, authentically benefit us, purely benefit us, unapologetically benefit our people, instead of something that's like a trick gift. You get out there, you fight the police, you fight the system. You the one get shot down. You get murdered. You get put in prison. You get your name smeared, in order to change some laws that other people benefit from. That's not freedom. That's not liberation. That's called just another form of exploitation, really a higher level of exploitation. And, eventually we got to say enough is enough and we got to do our own thing. That's why we say, help us here at the PGRNA, the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa. Join with us and help us build a better world. Help us build a nation. We are really building a nation that don't give a damn about us. We are already doing that. Every day we engage in the act of nation building, but we're building a nation that don't give a damn about us. Let's start building a nation that we control, that will actually create a better world and a better future for our children. And I'm gonna yield on that. So yeah, you got anything you wanna comment on, Brother Fadali? Anybody really? Okay.
No, I'm just sitting back and listening because we together we know enough about the history of those transfer religious members of Judaism, and it goes without saying that when we point out the truth about what's going on and what has been done by these people, we're going to end up having that because they've established themselves in this capitalist system in a way that they can utilize their resources, currency for the most part, to establish whatever they want to establish. That's how it has been since.
I want to say that what we're doing is that we want to make sure that we educate and re-educate our people, because a lot of people are churches are making trips to Israel every year. Black Christians, you know what I'm saying? In the illegal state in which Palestinians are being mistreated, are being killed, are being bombed, in a state that is illegal because it seized control of even the territory that it was supposedly given, illegally, by the UN, in 1947. So our people must be informed. We're not, so as a people, we are not, generally informed. This is the opportunity for us to be able to inform those people who are not informed, and to re-educate some of the people who are are affected by this so-called charges of anti-Semitism and all that, and we see how they divide up, like Charles Barkley and Shaq, came out automatically to attack, Kyrie Irving and all that, and they'll divide us up, and that's their intent, to make sure that they maintain their power and their control, and we found out that basically 6 million people, there's only 6 million people of that persuasion of the Zionists, in America. These people have, of European origin, they're not of Palestine, they're not from Palestine, they basically have been in Europe for hundreds of years, until they created a Zionist movement to return, supposedly to return to what they call their homeland, and we know that in the history of the homeland that it was still Palestine, but they did have two states according to the Old Testament that were created. One was called Judea, and the other was called Israel, and they were tiny little kingdoms inside of Palestine, and I think Brother Proctor pointed out the thing about the Babylonians and the Romans came in, and because they wanted to control, and ultimately the Turkish and all kinds of people came through, and then they put out the myth that the Palestinians, because for many hundreds of years since the Crusades, the people of Palestine lived peacefully among themselves. They were fighting against the British and all the other people that came in and took them over. And we know that we don't know it, but the movie Lawrence of Arabia show where they created all these states, Saudi Arabia and Syria, you know,
Jordan.
and yeah, and so consequently, even if you talk about Jordan, more than half the population of Jordan are Palestinian, you know, are Palestinian, you know, if it's not more, it's more than a majority, much more than. So because that's where you got the West Bank, you know, as a part of Palestine, you know, the so-called Israel and Gaza Strip and all that, because you know, the people when they fled, they went across the Jordan over to what they call the country they named Jordan, which was a CIA post. You know, King Hussein, the original king of Jordan, was a CIA paid, you know, agent, and you know to legitimize Israel, you know, as being you know a state in that area, you know, so that there will not be any wars against like you know coming out of Jordan or you know or any kind of battle that you know because Jordan was controlled by a dictator. His name was King Hussein at that time, and he was paid. You know, just like Saudi Arabia and Israel get more, you know, aid from the United States than any other, you know, states in the, you know, in the country, in the world, you know, in terms of, and all the guns and all the you know, weapons and even the atomic, you know, bomb that was built up by Israel, you know, came from the United States. You know, I think they supposedly have eliminated it now because they're afraid somebody might get, you know, in touch with it, you know, just like in South Africa. And Israel had a relationship with South Africa, what I call Azania, South Africa, you know, and created a situation which allowed them to be able to move to Palestine because outside of the state of Israel, the largest population of these people are in in New York City and in South Africa, right? So what I'm saying is, you know, they orchestrated, you know, their movements and went in and you know were allowed by the colonial power to come in and the people were defensive because they didn't have any weapons, no weapons. The Palestinians, you know, basically started their movements inside of Palestine, you know, in the 1960s and the war in 1967 and 1973, in which the you know the Israelis had to turn back some part of the land that they had taken from Egypt in the 67 war, the so-called 5-day war. So these are the kind of things that we have to you know get our people. You know we can't take for granted because so we'll have a whole movement of our people coming out against people like Kyrie and like Kanye. You see what I'm saying? Because they feel like they've done wrong. They're anti-Semitic, you know. And that whole anti-Semitic trick is a trick that has allowed them under the Anti-Defamation League to characterize but there's no people have been oppressed more than us in the United States. There's no people who have been more denigrated than us. Talking about African people in the United States. There's no people that have been deluded, you know, into going against their own interests other than us. And then they'll come up and say this 6% population, they've had 40% more anti-Semitic, you know, statements made against them. Like that, like it's a big thing, like it, you know, it's a life and death thing. Our stuff that's happening to us is life and death every day. And that is why we keep on saying all remedies have been exhausted and that we're going to be create our own, you know, our own statehood and all that. And so, but this is the kind of things we have to do. We have to be more educated about ourselves so we'll be able to articulate our movements and things. Like I said earlier, we have to link up. All the African people, all the progressive African people throughout the world have to link up so that we can create our and have control over our states that we are majority, you know, in all over the world. So so that the African diaspora can really come to power and fruition to the point that we see that illegal state doing, you know.
Yeah.
Their diaspora is the most powerful diaspora, you know, in the world.
Yeah. Let me jump in here real quick. Because you saying a whole lot of things, and I wanted to kind of you know jump on some of the things you're saying, especially when you were like how you spoke on how they use this word anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic, and they label people as anti-Semitic, and that basically discredits anything that they're saying. Right. What they're doing, that's a political tactic that's been used by several organizations. They use it probably the most effective in the entire world. And basically, all that is they weaponize a label. They create a label, and then they weaponize that label. And then anybody who has a critique against their movement, regardless of how legit or how true that critique is, they just label them as this weaponized word. In this case, it will be anti-Semitic, and therefore it discredits this individual as well as discrediting their whole critique. And it's just an easy way for them to not be held accountable for some of the things that they do, that people point out. And I mean, you want examples of this. We talked about this earlier. It's a rapper named Common. And there's several other rappers too. You know, first of all, rap music in general is known for being extremely violent toward Black people, extremely hateful toward Black people, extremely disrespectful toward Black women. If you want to talk about like something that is racist, well, rap music is extremely racist toward Black people. It's not like a white supremacist playbook, you know? And basically it gets celebrated for that. But rappers like Common, for example, which is not a gangster rapper, which is a very positive rapper, made one line in the album. He said, this hip hop thing is ran by a bunch of Jewish white men. That one statement. Now, he didn't talk about kill Jewish. He didn't say nothing about that. He didn't talk disrespect no Jewish woman. He didn't say anything really negative about Jewish people. He just said, hey, they run the hip hop industry. That's all he said. And his entire album was taken off the shelf, pulled, and re-released without that song on it. Now, it wasn't like the whole song was about Jewish people running hip hop. It was one line in one song on an entire album. But they say he's being anti-Semitic, but then you won't say anything about all of the rappers and the hip hop artists who celebrate murder of Black men, women, and children every day. Matter of fact, we just promote that, and the people who promote this, and a lot of the people who promote this, a lot of people who own the companies who promote this are Jewish people. They're Zionists, exactly, Zionists, because that's one of the critiques, that they own the music industry, the entertainment industry, the banking system, the media. So therefore, they control the narrative. That's why this rapper called The Baby, who said all kind of crazy stuff in this song, all type of crazy things in this song. But at a show, he said, and this is not necessarily about Zionists. This is about how this tactic is being used over and over by political movements. But he said, if you ain't sucked the D in the parking lot, then raise your hand. Well, this offended some people in the LGBT community, because LGBT have weaponized the words homophobia and transphobia. Because anytime you get labeled with them, even if you have a legitimate beef with them, then whatever you talk about, they just get brushed to the side. But yeah, he said that, and he got attacked, and he got to go on this big apology tour. And when I listen to his music, even though he's not one of the worst gangster rappers in the world, and I don't even know if you consider him a gangster rapper, but I hear many lines in his music that celebrate the murder of Black people. So this tactic, when they label someone as anti-Semitic, is simply a political tactic that's used to negate and discredit any legitimate argument or criticism of their movement. And it's something that's used again and again and again. We can't get tricked for that. We have to be able to do a critical analysis of what's being said and the history of it and the accuracy of it, and we have to be honest about it, and we have to educate ourselves properly. That's one of the main reasons we're doing this and we're talking about this subject, because we understand that Kyrie and Kanye West, they're of a certain class of people, and they don't necessarily advocate for New African Independence movement, but anytime there's an opportunity to educate our people, we should take it. You know what I'm saying? So we can raise our collective consciousness, so we can start making better collective decisions that are actually in our best interest, instead of being used by individuals who don't care about us, because that's what's happening over and over and over again. And I yield on that point.
I think that we need to know who our enemies are. Something that the Zionist movement is an enemy, of African people, in terms of how they, misuse and abuse us, in this respect. And so these are the kind of things that we have to begin, to be scientific as possibly we can, without emotion, without sentiment. We begin to struggle against these tendencies that want to keep us, enslaved as people.
Exactly. There are actually a couple of other books that you mentioned earlier that I think, if you want more about this information, especially when you talk about like the history of Israel and actually the history of the term Semitic, and who's actually a Semitic, what that actually means. Because, when you look at the term and you're looking at the individuals who started the Zionist movement, these are European Jews. These are people who, many of them, I can't say all, but many of them, especially when you talk about the Ashkenazi, many of them just joined this religion recently. And I say recently, the things, that we alluded to earlier, that they say give them claims to Israel, to the so-called Holy Land, is in the 6th century BCE, before the Christian era. There was a war between the Babylonian kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar II, and the kingdom of Judah. I think that's what it was called during the time. And some of them got expelled. And something similar happened in 70 AD, Anno Domini, which means in the year of our Lord. This happened with, people also say BCE, the CE, the Christian era. But this also happened between Rome and what we call Israel today, I think. But in that particular area, when people got defeated, and they say they were kicked out of their land. Taken out of there. And this is the claim that they have. They say, well, we are the chosen people. But like we said, Judaism is not a people. That is a religion. They present it as if we are a people, if they are a people, and they're talking about these Zionists, these European Jewish people, which accepted the religion during the time. We understand their history. We understand the history of the Ashkenazi. And matter of fact, they just did DNA, and they said that the majority of the Ashkenazi Jewish people ancestry lie right there in Eastern Europe. Nowhere near the so-called Middle East. And first of all, Middle East is a term that's not really accurate. It was created partly to discredit the civilizations of Africa and for other reasons. But that's another story. But these so-called, Jewish people, European Jews, who are so quick to say you're being anti-Semitic, when you study Israel and see what's going on in Israel by these European Jewish people, even today, you see African Jews, Philosophers of Ethiopia, suffering great discrimination in Israel today, even though these individuals are far more ancient than the so-called Ashkenazi, the Kaisers, the Hasidic, all of these European Jews who run the Zionist movement. But they're being discriminated against. The African people who went to Israel to seek asylum in Israel are facing some of the worst racism on the planet today. Right now, all you got to do is look it up. The Israeli people in Israel right now, they ain't even hiding it. They let it be known, we don't like these niggas. Get these death to these niggas. It's a massive movement in Israel today against Black people right now. So the hypocrisy of this Zionist movement to condemn people who have a criticism of some of the actions and some of the things that they have done, that they have been documented to do. I mean, the hypocrisy is endless, but there are books that you can get to, so you can better educate yourself about all of this stuff, the origins of it, what it really means. So if you try to critique them, your analysis will be correct. Because one of the biggest issues that I'm seeing is we're not educated enough to have a proper analysis, which makes it easy for people to attack us when we come out. You know, when you attack people based on a religion and not a political movement, then it's easy to say, oh, you're saying something wrong. So we need to have our analysis correct. Like said earlier, The Secret Relationship Between Black and Jews, put out by the Nation of Islam. The African origins of, what was that?
Three major Western religions.
Yeah, the African origins of the three major Western religions in Islam. Yeah. And what was that? We the Black Jews. Yeah, we the Black Jews. Yeah, Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben do a lot of good work on this. He had some epic battles with some Ashkenazi. Yeah, you know, had major doctors like shut him down. Like, ooh, we got to go to commercial because he killing this dude too much. So yeah, it's really important that we hold ourselves to a higher standard with our analysis, with how we're educating ourselves. So when we go out and speak, we're just not regurgitating some conspiracy theory that somebody from YouTube said. We have to be correct with our analysis. It's really important. And that's why we're so fortunate to have individuals like the Grandmaster Teacher here to really break down the history. I thank you for that. Want to acknowledge some of the people who are out there because we're getting blown up. Hey, man, there you go, comrade. You got them out there. Go read some of these comments, man. Read some of these comments. You being all quiet. We ain't gonna let you get away from it. Well, hold on. Last week you up there showing out because you can speak Spanish and stuff and trying to all the Chicano women like, oh, look at him. He can speak that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm jealous. I'm jealous now.
It's all about liberation first.
That's a good comeback.
Yeah.
I'm still jealous. But that's all right, though. That's all right. You my brother and I love you.
Yeah, it's a lot of comments. Where should I start? Because I've seen some interesting. Now that I got it blown up, I can't see on the ticker where this fell.
Just pick something.
All right. Let me blow this up. The problem with the movie was the denial of the Jewish Holocaust to come out shortly after cloning white nationalist rhetoric. Who is that? That's Adana Sinam.
So yeah.
What she is referring to is the movie that Kyrie Irving put out, that he posted. In that movie or that documentary, it denied the Holocaust. And that's like what we're talking about when people spread incorrect analysis. It makes you an easy target for criticism and attack by the Zionist movement. I mean, they're waiting on you to slip up. Even if your analysis is absolutely correct, then they're going to attack you. But when you have incorrect analysis and you spread things that are incorrect, and then you make it easy for them to attack you. So that's extremely correct, Queen. You're right on that. That was the problem with it. But continue, brother.
Yeah, and so then I was looking at a response to it, though, Brother Tiva. Those people are particularly from Ethiopia. Falashas, right. And then this young lady has an interesting comment. Palestinians are Semitic, but Zionism as a political ideology has clouded people's critical analysis. So what do you guys say about that, Grandmaster Teacher?
Okay, so when we're looking at, like I say, even before the term Zionism came into being, we have people, like from Eastern and Western Europe who became a part of the money-making so-called slave trade, slave raid, kidnapping, the giant kidnapping venture by the Europeans. then so consequently, so when we look at even that, in other words, not for religious purposes, but for their own aggrandizement, to make money, and they became partners to the other Europeans who were engaged in the slave trade, and they insured their ships. They, insured the goods, the chains and all the different kinds of property that were being acquired by the so-called slave ships. And like I said, even the Elizabeth I, the Tudor Queen, of England is engaged, in slavery through loans that were been taken from those people who established the banks, and those were people who are in Eastern Europe as prophets say that set up the financing, for the slave trade to take place, to be able to, go to finance ships and bring, hundreds of thousands of Africans from the African continent, and then in the South, some of them became partners in, on plantations and things like that, and in the secret relationship between blacks and Jews that was published by the Nation of Islam. They even called some names like Cohen and Green, because in America, a lot of them changed their names, So they showed somebody in Cohen. It may not be Steve Cohen or whatever, but I'm saying the name Cohen was prominent in Tennessee in terms of in being involved in the slave trade. So, but the Zionist movement itself came up with a strategy of how they were going to get a homeland, and their strategy was they were going to get whatever power that was in that was in charge, whether it could have been the Ottoman Turks, it could have been the British. It wound up being the British because the British took over, and the French took over much of that area of what they call the Middle East. Some people call it Near East. And they were able to, and that movie Lawrence of Arabia, is an excellent movie that showed how they were able to split up, and they created Arabia to Saudi Arabia, called King Saul, Ibn Saul was and they renamed Arabia, which was part of Africa, to Saudi Arabia. And it gave them the interest to be able to come in to Palestine and purchase. They had purchased land, but ultimately that 1947 agreement of the UN that Ralph J. Bunche persuaded some Arabs to participate in the creation of the state of Israel. So it's important that we be able to draw those links. But even before the term Zionism came into being, they had control over elements of our community, in the abolition movement, and the abolition movement in terms of, and like I said, even in modern so-called United States history, we see that they start calling places where we live ghettos, as they did for the Jews that were brought over from Rome, brought over during that time, in the 1200s and stuff like that, and separated them from being part of the entire European community. That they gave them ghetto. They lived in a certain specific area and was allowed to control those areas. They called them ghettos. That's where the word ghetto came from. And so we got to begin to understand, and so many of us began to identify with them, like the NAACP, the establishment, that, and other, the Urban League, came up under the influence of these same people, and they controlled the civil rights. They would write speeches and stuff for King and, people like that. And these are the kind of things we had to understand. And but when we began to resist, to break away, and we said Black Power and stuff like that, then we had a separation, and then we began to become critical. People like Kwame Ture with critical Zionism, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and all that. And then you start having the attacks on our movement and the undermining of our movement by using the term anti-Semitism to make it, saying that any kind of criticism, whether it's legitimate or not, came up under the name anti-Semitism. The Anti-Defamation League is a main organization set up by the Zionists in America to do a watch over anything that's been stated, in media or whatever, And then CBS, which is a part of it, and New York Times, which was like part of the, communication. They were owned by these people,
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick. First, I want to make everybody understand. We're not talking about the Jewish religion, right? Because first of all, that's unscientific. That's not correct within an analysis. So we're not talking about the Jewish religion. We're not talking about that people who are members of the Jewish faith per se. We are talking about a political movement, a political ideology, right, that has been very successful. We're just being honest, but being very successful at pushing their agenda. But like we said, there is no political movement whatsoever that is above criticism. So we want to make it clear that this is what we talk about. Even though we're not talking about the religion, and we're trying to be correct in our analysis, they will still label this as anti-Semitic. They still would attack us and say what we're saying is wrong and whatever, because, like you said, any type of critique against their particular movement, they just labeled it as anti-Semitic because they weaponized the word and they use that so they can continue to gain political power. But you can go to some more comments, comrade.
Yeah, one of the comments. Let me just say this about the Judaism religion. Number one, you have a group of people that are using the religion to benefit themselves whenever they're criticized on how they came about obtaining their wealth and land. It's just going to be chaotic and confusing because the people who claim to be Jews use the religion to defend whatever we say about their actions in the past. So yeah, it's going to always be a situation where they throw the religion in and say we're anti-Semitic to control the narrative about what the people have done to obtain what they have today. And that's the state of Israel and all of the industries that they control worldwide. But that's just my what 2 cents. What Miss Queen Mother Patricia Lee say?
My 2 cents.
My 2 cents about that. Yeah, that's what it is. But then the sister has another comment, and it's very interesting. It say we must say never forget Ma'afa. I hope I pronounced that right.
Ma'afa is correct, and I really
wanted you to say that comment because Jewish people always say never forget the Holocaust, never forget. First of all, the Ma'afa, that's our African Holocaust. That's what that is. That is still going on to this very day. It's still going on now. But the Jewish people will always say, never forget, never miss an opportunity to say, never forget about the Holocaust. When people make a critique of their movement and they are labeled as anti-Semitic, they say, oh, come on, let's look at the Holocaust museums because you can never forget our Holocaust. And that would get me wrong. You should never forget it. It's terrible. But when we bring up slavery, they say, oh, forget about it. That's old, in the past. Shut the hell up. Shut the fuck up. Why are you complaining about it? Why are you talking about old shit? So, damn right, Queen. Never forget our Ma'afa. I don't care what they tell you, what they try to say. That it's in the past. I mean, we having the hardest time just for them to teach our history in the school system. We having the hardest time just to do that. So I'm with you with that. Never forget our Ma'afa, which is still going on to this very day right now. You can continue, comrade.
Yeah, but but you're right. I mean, you start looking at every aspect of which we can see that they're attacking us from. Remember, under the auspices of these Europeans here in the United States, we're at the mercy of them to do the research behind the foods that we eat, do the research behind environmental concerns that we have. We're at the mercy of our colonizer, our oppressor, to give us the end results of things that we need to be examining for ourselves. We're starting to talk about certain things that are obvious, like the education of our children. But many of us haven't gotten to the point, because of miseducation, to see the benefit of home schooling of our children. We have many of our brothers and sisters who have become clear that it's our responsibility to educate our children, and they've begun to do so. But in the midst of that, they created, I know, on the East Coast, in the tri-state, in the DMV, when you want to charter a school that in particular is teaching African studies for the most part, and raising our children, there's a series of guidelines you have to adhere to become licensed to even do homeschooling there. So even when we do find solutions, we have to understand, because we don't have our own independent sovereign nation, they will create laws, statutes, policies that will deter us from being most effective in what we're trying to do, as long as we're in the system. We see that each and every day. I was talking about, we don't test anything like the foods. We don't test anything, the vaccines that they're giving us.
So how do we do that if we're not organized?
That's what I wanted you to come in on.
We have to have a collective. And what I'm saying is, our first collective is we got to fight off whatever the assaults that they're making against us politically. Because if we don't do that, then we'll never be able to reach the people to do the other things that will be necessary. So the collective first has to, that's why we said politics first. Because in other words, the people have to know who they are and all those things. And when we talk about education, in this sense, we're talking about political education. And once we get the political education set up, we'll be able to get our people to look at other things, to examine anything. But everything has to be done, like you said, on a scientific basis.
That's right.
And once we understand that, and so our politics has to be just as scientific. In other words, where we know who the enemy is and what the enemy is trying to do. But our problem is trying to get the people to understand who the enemy is. Who are our friends and who are our enemies. The basic problems that we have to solve first in order to be able to do all of, like, and one example in the 70s, when we had a certain high level of consciousness, there were groups of people throughout the country They organized the independent African organization, CB, Council of Independent Black Institutions. And they were setting up schools all over the United States, to teach our children our education, the whole process being taken over. And so one of the things they've done, like when they, destroyed the Black Panther Party, when the Black Panther Party was doing the survival programs and all those things, in other words, making a question about how we should be taking care of ourselves to the point. So that's why collectively, you'll never, but any group that has a special interest. So because we got people that are vegan, and they all come together all over the country, and they create their movement for us not to be eating meats or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Because it's poor for our health. To increase our health. So those things, but they have to be a politically organized group to understand that this is what our people, we need. And so we can specialize in all areas once we get ourselves politically understanding of, where we are and who we are as a people. If we're still mistaken about our identity, then we'll never get, that's what happened when I talk about, and why I said the links, what's happening in Ethiopia. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
These are African people that are war, with one another because they said they are Amharic, you know what I'm saying? Amharic are the ones that were under Haile Selassie, group that ruled Ethiopia for how many hundreds of years or whatever. And then you got the, Tigrian people. Then you got the Oromo people. Then you got the Eritrea. You hear what I'm saying? So as long as we are confused about our identity, about who we are and what our interests are overall politically, that's why we said politics first, because that's the only way that we're going to wade through all that confusion that has been proposed, and then we'll gain control of the state. You see what I'm saying? Because we have states that have been created, right? But we don't have control of those states. Those states that what a brother prophet talk called ruled by blackface but white rule still exists. So neocolonialism. So consequently, until we can begin to clear that out and have those struggles, because we have people who basically have sided with the enemy, and that's what is described in Nkrumah, revolutionary warfare, and in class struggle as the internal enemies, the class enemies. So we there's a lot of stuff that we have to do.
So, Grandmaster Teacher, since you said that,
right,
I want to ask you this: political sense or perspective.
Right.
How do we get our people to understand what it means to focus on liberation and having our own independent sovereign nation?
Okay.
And how do you apply that to a political sense?
Okay, so what I'm saying is within the structure itself, we have a structure. We have a government, right?
Provisional government, Republic
of New Africa. It has to come within that. I mean, the political understanding and conscience, it has to be brought up to the highest level, where we are all together, right? See, some of us want to think we can negotiate with the enemy, and they're gonna give us a land. You can't be that way. It got to be that we're gonna seize control of these. We're gonna move in. We got to have our strategy, like the Zionists, like the Zionists have their strategy.
Right.
But our strategy has to be to pull us together, as a whole, and understand that the enemy will never. That's why I keep on pointing that stuff out about Haiti. That there will never be an independent black political republic.
In reference to the Monroe Doctrine.
Right, and in reference to Thomas Jefferson, in 1802. And so what I'm saying is, consequently, and that has to be an understanding that has to be established in all the African states. I'm talking about in the Western Hemisphere. I'm talking about Jamaica and Haiti, Dominican Republic. It's a lot of African states that are not, that we don't control the resources or anything that, Venezuela. Yeah, all those. And Cuba is the lone one, and Cuba and Nicaragua are the lone ones that have, that struggled, mightily against that system, this system of the Western Hemisphere being controlled by the United States. But we're gonna have to link up. Everybody else has to be linked up into a united structure, and here we have to just convince the people of the reality that we do have a government and that it's sanctioned by the UN, by genocide, the whole question of genocide and all those things, Right. So that's what the education has. But within the structure itself, we have to come together and think and know that that we have to, in other words, in order to our people, we have to have a unity within ourselves in the organization, in the collective. And then once we do that, and everybody who is representing the government begin to understand that it's going to take that we are in a war, and it's going to take us preparing for to win the war, in order for us to have our independence and for our people to come forward and and see the governors in mega ever city. You see what I'm saying? To see the governors in Ida B. Well, that's talking about that's dealing with controlling the land,
And going to Nation Day, which
right.
is when
Nation Day is the end of May, the last weekend
March.
of March.
Yeah, March. That's right.
Like May 31st
March,
to April
March
2nd.
31st.
I mean March 31st. March 31st to April 2nd. I think that's the date. Yeah. Whatever, like the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that last weekend in March. So yeah.
So we can pull that.
It was created in March 31st to April 2nd in 1968.
Yes.
The original government.
So
the Nation Day.
Oh yes, that's that Friday. To the 2nd is that next week.
South Carolina.
To that Monday.
So
Charleston, South Carolina. That's right.
Definitely. So we've been on for over an hour now. About time for us to wrap it up. I'm gonna give everybody the final words before we dismiss today. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody comments. Y'all have the greatest comments. I always say we have the most educated audience in the land, and I want to thank everybody for your participation. But Grandmaster Teacher, what's your final words for the day?
Yeah, we're going to win the struggle. We're going to win the movement. We're going to win the 5-state, and we're going to win Pan-African internationally, and we're going to be the people who are going to produce a truly socialist society that's going to impact on the world economy.
All right. Comrade Fadali.
Yes.
I think you meant
Kokai. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but in actuality, people out there listening, we're being attacked from all angles. You can look in our neighborhood and see what's flourishing in our neighborhood: liquor stores, churches, dialysis machine locations. We have to be focused on the fact that they single us out. When they single us out, they're very successful. They will single these brothers out, just like they singled the other brother out from San Francisco, and their life is going to be shot. Our best way of succeeding is doing it collectively. Reach out to the Republic of New Africa, the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa, and begin that movement towards a collective movement of our people striving for an independent sovereign nation to be the catalyst of us changing the rest. Let's get together collectively and support the Republic of New Africa, the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa.
That's correct, comrade. Thank you for that. Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So sorry about that. But yeah, we will end it off. Thank you, Mr. Joe Gonzalez. Appreciate you tuning in, brother, and everybody. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, for giving me the comments. Can y'all hear me now? Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry we can't get to all the comments. We have so many. I say one of the best parts of the show are actually the comments. So thank you again, and make sure y'all join us every week, every Sunday. We're probably going to start it around 12:30 because sometimes a lot of other things be going on when we're having our radio broadcast, so it might just be easier to start our social media portion of the show after the radio broadcast, so we can focus our undivided attention to our comrades out there. But join us tomorrow as we meet with the President and Vice President of the Republic of New Afrika, Sama Ad and Mama Ayo Deli, on our New African Perspective. And Tuesday, you'll see those queens again on their own show, where they talk about a whole lot of different things, a lot of things that we need to really deal with internally to get ourselves right. And that is the foundation of the nation, which is the family, man, woman, and child. And Thursday, come have this revolution party with my comrade Atiba and myself, and we will be having a conversation between comrades, and them comrades meaning all of us. And Friday, Melly Queen do her thing at 5 o'clock Central Time on the Blog Talk Radio with the Truth and Power Corner. So join us all week. And of course, you can look at check us out on Naba Radio. That's Naba Radio. And we do the thing all week long. We're trying to educate the uneducated and really free our minds to a place so we can start acting in a way that is in our best interest. So with that, I am Brother Prophecy for comrade, my comrade in the struggle, my brother, the one and only Kanye, and also the elder, the Grand Master Teacher for Dolly. We want to greet y'all and leave y'all with our battle cry as always, and that is free the land, free the land, free the land. And we out, y'all. I should always have this stuff queued up, but I never do. I'm sorry, y'all. But we'll see y'all again next week, y'all. Love y'all as always. Dang, where is that?
Yeah,
and when you bring it in, you brought it in for the purpose of weakening the revolutionary tide of the people.
It must not be a capitalist system, but we don't want to exploit anybody. We don't want to be exploited, and we don't want to exploit anybody.
Ain't nobody gonna do it for us. It's nobody outside of yourself, nobody outside of ourselves that's going to do this work for us. We have to put in that real work.
Because the better you are in exploiting people, the more successful you are within capitalism.
We want to say salute to all our political prisoners, our POWs, our elder comrades in exile.
The satisfaction we need as a people only comes through liberation and independence.
Because we're not just building for self, we're building for the family, because the family is broken. We're building for the community is broken. The nation is broken, the race is under attack. We're in a state of emergency.
You're tuned in to the New African Broadcast Association, where we